Holy haberdashery!
These videos are satiric reviews. You don't have to agree, but don't bitch about it. I hate this channel.
Hey there, I'm the SIJW Infuso. And I doubt that anyone's actually gonna see this video, because I mean, let's face it, you guys only tune in when I'm roasting somebody, or I'm talking about wrestling, and this, well, this is neither. And on top of that, the title in of itself is kinda confusing, and I know this because I'm the guy who made this video, and I'm not even sure what I'm gonna put the title as, so it's confusing even for me. So like I said, I doubt that 2 people are gonna watch this, let alone 2,000. But allow me to clarify. This video is about Batman characters who were created outside of the comics but made their way back into the source material after the fact. These were the characters that were created for their own continuities, whether it be animated series, live-action TV show, movies, video games, and basically any other kind of media medium. With that being said, let's take a look back at all these Batman characters. Batgirl. Okay, so yeah, Batgirl did exist in the comics before any of her other appearances, but wait, hold on, hear me out, I'm not a liar just yet. This version of the character wasn't Batgirl per se, but Bat-Girl. Common misconception. And the characters of Batgirl and Batwoman were only written into the Batman and Robin Golden Age continuity because of the infamous Seduction of the Innocent book. A book which claimed that Batman and Robin were indoctrinating children into a gay lifestyle. And why they'd be more concerned about a potential Batman and Robin gay relationship rather than a very inappropriate underage Batman and Robin dynamic is anyone's guess. That would be my concern. But you know, it was the 50s. Anyway, Batwoman and Batwoman and Bat-Girl were originally written in to prove the character's heterosexuality. Always a good reason. Always a good reason to include a character. Because, you know, if you just have, like somebody single, it's like, yo, hey, you gay? Because I ain't with that. I don't like that. Get that out of here. The two were literally brought in just to be characters' love interests. These characters eventually went the way of the dinosaurs in 1964. And Bat-Girl was no more. But the Batgirl mantle would be taken up once again when the producers of the 1960s Adam West Batman series asked that the boys in DC create a female counterpart for Batman and Robin, and enter Barbara Gordon. She was introduced at the request of the showrunners to be included both in their show and their original comic book series that show was based on, creating and establishing the Batgirl and Barbara Gordon we all know and love. While her time as Batgirl is undoubtedly iconic, it's what would follow her tenure in the Batsuit that really makes the character completely unforgettable. So while she technically did show up in the comic books first, it was because of the 1960s Batman series, so I'm gonna count it Renee Montoya. Batman the Animated Series is one of, if not the most beloved adaptation of The Dark Knight in any form of media to this day. I mean, still to this day, that's no hyperbole. See? I do know how to say it. You thought I didn't, but I do. You're welcome, thank you, and subscribe. Still to this day, it's considered to be the perfect and ideal incarnation of the Caped Crusader. And one of the many things you can credit this series for is its ability to create and develop new characters that fit in perfectly with the world of Batman. Case in point, Officer Renee Montoya, a sensible, strong, and passionate cop working for the GCPD in the Major Crimes Unit. She often partnered with the corrupt or otherwise lackadaisical Harvey Bullock, who is her very obvious opposite. Renee was a good-hearted, strong-willed, and instinctually intelligent individual, which is why she was probably brought to comic book panels. She'd actually be incorporated into the comic book shortly after her first couple appearances, before eventually becoming a main character in the Gotham Central series. She was an interesting character initially, and throughout time she's only continued to get more fleshed out, within the last 10 to 15 years her becoming openly gay, and even more recently taking over the mantle of the Question. She's also appeared in a number of other Batman adaptations, including Gotham and an upcoming Birds of Prey movie. Chief O'Hara. Chief O'Hara, like Batgirl, was created specifically for the 1960s Batman TV series. He mainly served as Gordon's right-hand man as the two clueless officers would ask the pleasant man in the batsuit for his advice. But he was still one of the most recognizable characters on the show. Because of this, only a few months after his initial appearance, he was put into the comics at the time, and was continued to be used all the way up until the early 2000s. And then he died. While in the comics he was given the first name of Clancy, as the show itself never really addressed his first name, he was just referred to as Chief O'Hara. It's important to note that later on, when the animated movie sequels came out to the 1960 show, he was then given the name of Miles. Why? I don't know. Lockup. Okay, I'll admit, this is definitely a lesser-known villain. Even when I brought him up to several Batman fanatics that I happen to know, they didn't seem to know or remember him, but here we go, y'all looking stupid now. I tried to tell you, you didn't want to believe me. So now you're gonna watch this, and now you're gonna feel dumb. That's what you get. Lockup was a character originally introduced in the animated series we mentioned a little bit earlier, you might remember. And we'll also probably continue to reference that animated series throughout this entire list. He starts off as a security expert at Wayne Enterprises before Bruce recommends him as the chief of security down at Arkham Asylum. This winds up being a pretty bad idea, as he mistreats and borderline abuses the patients at the facility, using aggressive and brutal intimidation tactics on those he looks over. His demeanor and abuse of power is enough to frighten the most vile of inmates. This man put fear into the Scarecrow. That's kind of his whole thing. Upon hearing that the Arkham inmates ratted him out, he takes his frustrations out on them, before deciding that he could do whatever Batman can, thus rebranding himself as Lockup. Now, just imagine, if you want a good sense of what the Lockup character is, just imagine a bargain brand Bane without the Venom or the Legacy. What's really interesting about this character is that this was his only outing in this universe. Lockup didn't return past his initial debut, but it was somehow enough for him to be brought back for Chuck Dixon's Nightwing comics. By the way, if you haven't read those, what are you doing with your life? The Flashpoint series, and even the Arrowverse comics, to name a few. The Phantasm. The Phantasm was a character somewhat inspired by the DC character The Reaper. Mostly, and probably only, really, now that I think about it, in appearance. You can kind of see that, skull-like mask, there's some hooded wardrobe there, claw for a hand, you could see where it took inspiration. The character was conceived by the animated series for the movie Mask of the Phantasm, which is a highlight for that universe. If you haven't watched it, once again, what are you doing with your life? And it's yet another example of an original character the series created that stood the test of time. The Phantasm's identity was revealed to be Andreia Beulah, probably not saying that right, an ex who shared a very similar background to Bruce Wayne. And you'd know that had you walked down your local Toys R Us aisle as a kid to see her action figure, which was sold, unmasked, before the movie came out, for some reason. I don't know who made that call, but pat yourself on the back with a batarang. And while she continued to make appearances in the form of Easter eggs and cameos over the years, she will finally officially be brought into the Batman comic lore in the upcoming comic series Batman and Catwoman. And that's good to hear. Guys, don't screw it up. The Grey Ghost. Once again, back to the Diniverse. The Grey Ghost was a character initially conceived for the Batman animated series. If you're tired of hearing it, I'm tired of saying it. He was the childhood idol of Bruce Wayne. He's the aging star of the TV series The Grey Ghost, where he played a vigilante who was a huge inspiration to Batman and probably helped shape the hero he'd become. And that story is only made that much better in knowing that the Grey Ghost is actually portrayed by former Batman Adam West.
Adam West, Adam West.
Like Lockup, he only had one appearance on the series, but that appearance is a pretty damn memorable one. And while nobody really remembers Lockup, nobody will ever forget the Grey Ghost. It's no wonder he'd later show up in the comic Gotham Academy, in a feud with Basil Karlo Clayface, in the Batgirl comics as an alternate version of his character named Clancy Jones, and he'd even return a few times in the Batman the Animated Series follow-up comics. Plus, if you keep your eye open, you can usually find a Grey Ghost reference somewhere. The Arkham Knight. The Arkham Knight started a few years back as the main antagonist of the Arkham Knight. That was clever. No, it's clever, guys. You're doing good. It's fine. Leading up to the game, the developers promised to give the Arkham universe and Batman a brand new villain, which they kind of didn't. They kind of just took a pre-existing person character and then just put some paint on him. It was like, oh, new.
No!
But it's not, because the paint chipped, and we all knew what was underneath anyway, right? The Knight in that game was revealed to be none other than a past Robin, but pre-Red Hood Jason Todd, who was out seeking his revenge on Batman for not saving him from the clutches of the Joker, who in this continuity was already dead, so at least that makes a little bit of sense. Jason concealed his identity, terribly, might I add, terribly. Everybody knew. Everybody knew. Didn't even have to play the game, looked at the character, knew who it was. He concealed his identity terribly throughout the game until his final reveal. Recently, the Arkham Knight has been incorporated into the mainstream comics. And while the armored character still basically looks the same, on the inside they couldn't be any more different. In DC Comics, the Arkham Knight is actually the daughter of the founder of Arkham Asylum, Jeremiah Arkham, Astrid Arkham. I'm sorry if that sentence was confused. I don't do the words so well. Astrid is misguided into thinking Batman killed her mother and creates the suit to help get her revenge. And this is a very welcome change. Terry McGinnis. Right back to the Diniverse. When Bruce Wayne finally left the mantle of Batman due to his old age, he'd eventually pass the torch to Terry McGinnis. McGinnis takes up his namesake at the tender age of 16 years old, following the murder of his father, with Bruce Wayne essentially playing the role of Oracle, and it's a surprisingly great pairing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Terry's great, but on paper he's everything that Bruce isn't, and therefore you would think everything that Batman's not. He's overly sarcastic, he spends just as much time bantering with his enemies as he does fighting crime, and because of his age, he can be really immature and even unreasonable from time to time. And yet somehow, against all of that, he manages to be everything you'd hope to see in a Batman. The character has since been brought over to several different comic continuities, with the Batman Beyond name being used on both a comics version of Terry McGinnis and also Tim Drake, for some reason. I don't know. Terry continues to be used in a bunch of comics and shares the same attitude and a similar appearance to his cartoon counterpart, Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze has a very interesting backstory, both inside his continuities, but also here in our real-life canon. He was initially created in the Golden Age comics as Mr. Zero, a gimmicky, once-off villain, until he was brought into the 1960 show, which further helped solidify him. Of course, there he was betrayed by a different actor each and every time he was on screen, but hey, it still helped, nonetheless. Fast forward to a mere 30 years later, and the Batman the Animated Series completely reinvented this character. Not only changing his name to Mr. Freeze, but by also giving him a heartbreaking backstory and really humanizing the villain. He went from a Saturday morning cartoon to a real-life, three-dimensional person. And that's despite his first on-screen iteration being on a real live-action series, and his second being put into a cartoon. The interpretation of Freeze from the animated series completely redefined the character, and he's since remained an important fixture in almost all interpretations of Batman. Usually with his tragic backstory intact as well, Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn might be the most successful character created outside of the Batman comics. Initially being created just as a throwaway henchwoman for the Joker, she immediately became an integral part of the series and the continuity of Batman for years to come. Starting off as Joker's obnoxious and oblivious love interest, and over time becoming one of the most iconic characters in the history of the comic. She's come so far in terms of popularity that she's practically nearly trumped the Joker. She's been fleshed out over time from a woman hopelessly in love with the madman to a psychiatrist who developed Stockholm Syndrome for one of her patients. I don't even really need to devote all that much time here to telling you about her, because let's face it, you know her. You know who she is. You know that she's everywhere. I couldn't sit here and tell you all the different continuities that she's in the comic books, because she's in pretty much all of them. As a matter of fact, most things that are made that are Batman related today include Harley Quinn in some form or fashion. She's in the Suicide Squad. She's in the Injustice series. She's gonna be in the Birds of Prey movie. She's all over the place. Harley Quinn is one of the most famous characters in all of Batman lore. Like I said, I don't need to devote that much time to her here today because I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Everyone knows Harley Quinn, and that's a testament to her increase in popularity over the years. So there you have it, some of the most important and significant characters in Batman lore were created outside of the original medium. Some of the most memorable and most beloved heroes, villains, civilians, vigilantes, and everything in between in Batman history were created elsewhere.
I'm the Clown Prince of Crime, and that was the Prince of Personality, the Infuso. Or so he says. So if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole and you too want to become a VTard, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow the man on Twitter, because it's not stalking if it's on the internet after all. Join the fun by joining the Discord. If for some strange reason you want to show support, and I don't know why you would, and if you have $1 to spare, head over to the SIJW's Patreon, where you can request videos, get exclusive content, and early access to scheduled videos. Or head to his PayPal, where you can buy the shirts. Oh, aren't those lovely? And just remember, if you're not tuning in, you're missing out. Yeah.